Good afternoon and welcome to the Planning Committee sitting here on the 14th of April. You probably can see that my Vice Chairman, who's normally sit to my left, is not here. So with your agreement, I would like to ask Councillor Bruce Forbes to be my Vice Chairman for the meeting for today. Is that okay? Agreed? Okay, thank you. Just let him get into place. For the benefit of the members in the gallery and anybody watching YouTube on this meeting, I'm Councillor Gary Marsh. I'm the Chairman of the Planning Committee. To my left is now Councillor Forbes instead of Councillor Coote. He'll be my Vice Chairman. To his left are Zach and Tom, are the legal representatives. To my right is Stephen King even, he's my guru for today, the team leader. To his right is Rachel, who's taken us through the first planning application. In front of me are the members of the committee who will be making this decision. Off to the right is our IT king, and off to our left is Helen, who's taking the minutes of the meeting. So, Vice Chairman, could you just read out the safety? The right one. That's left.
Sorry about that. I'll come from me left for me right. The building fire alarm signal is a continuous two-tone alarm. On hearing the evacuation alarm, leave the building by the nearest marked exit route. Follow the green signs to the assembly point, which is a large staff car park opposite the entrance to the building. Anyone who cannot use the stairs will be out by officers present after other people have left. Do not return to the building and then told it is safe to do so by an authorised officer. The whole of the council site is no smoking area. The mobile phones must be switched to silent.
Vice Chairman. All right. Item 1 on the agenda is to receive apologies for absence. We've got 5. Councillor Walker, Councillor Hussain, Councillor Sweatman, and Councillor DeBale. My thoughts with Councillor DeBale, he's not very well and he's in East Surrey Hospital at this point in time. I don't know about Councillor Eccleston, if he could have emailed me, but I've not checked my phone. If he has, then I'll talk to you, Ellen, about it, if it is or not. Okay, item 2 on the agenda is receive declaration of interest from members. Any item on the agenda? Anybody got anything? Nope. Okay. Item 3 is to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of February, when we had our last meeting. Could you indicate on the touch screen, yes if you agree with it, yellow is, it's the green one we want to go for if we like it, or the X for not. Yep, we're all here. I'll sign the minutes after the thing. Thank you. Crib sheet I'm going to follow. Item 4 is to receive items that I agree to take as urgent business. I do not have any. So we'll now move to the substantive part of why we're here for today. And this is DM 193234, Little Abbotsford, Isaacs Lanes, Burgess Hill, West Sussex. And this one's yours, Rachel.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is Little Abbotsford, Isaacs Lane, Burgess Hill, West Sussex, DM 193234. And it's for the proposed erection of 9 dwellings with associated parking, turning areas, and new access onto Isaacs Lane, with all other matters reserved apart from access details. And to slide 2. previous to this, just would like to update members that you should be referring to the update sheet for the revision to be made to recommendation B, and for the deletion of the words affordable housing provision. And there's also another revision which refers to the description of the site and the fact that the site is bounded on all sides by the Northern Arc strategic allocated site. So, slide 3 shows the location plan, and you will see the site outlined in red, which you can see with my cursor, and the red lines along Isaacs Lane frontage illustrate the visibility displays, and you can see within the site the existing buildings, which comprise the existing two-storey detached dwelling and some outbuildings to the north and to the west. The site lies off the western side of Isaacs Lane in Burgess Hill, and it comprises of those buildings. There are various shrubs and trees planted within and around the site. The site is relatively flat and adjoins open fields to the north, south and western boundaries. There is also an open field on the opposite side of Isaacs Lane to the east. And as said before, the land is surrounded by the strategic Northern Arc development. Moving on to the next slide, this is an extract from the district plan showing the built-up area boundary. This slide illustrates the location of the site and that in terms of planning policy it lies within the built-up area as defined in the Mid-Sussex district plan and within the strategic development allocation for the north and northwest of Burgess Hill under policy DP9. Woodfield House, which is referred to in the report, is up here to the north and outside of the area yellow, as you can see here, which is DP9 policy. The site in question, Little Abbotsford, is just here. Woodfield House is proposing it proposed and approved 30 houses, and that's, as I say, referred to in the committee report, and that was approved at the planning committee in June 2020. Moving on to the next slide is the indicative site layout plan. This slide shows the illustrative layout and that the provision of 9 dwellings can be comfortably accommodated on the application site. It shows 2 terraces with 5 houses fronting onto Isaacs Lane and 4 facing northwards and accessed by a footpath, which is. Proposed vehicular access is shown to the southern side of the proposed housing with parking and turning areas. The site layout also shows the trees to be retained on the northern boundary in the southeastern corner and together with landscaping which includes tree planting along Isaacs Lane frontage, which is just there. Slide 6 is the indicative proposed east elevation, and this slide shows an indicative illustration of the eastern elevation along the Isaacs Lane frontage with 3-storey townhouses with external materials to reflect the vernacular of those existing in the locality. Slide 7. This is the highways access plan post-Northern Arc construction, and this slide shows the access plan including the proposed Northern Arc access beyond the red-edged site boundary to the south, which is here. It shows a 2.4 metre by 70 metre visibility display from the proposed access in both directions to the north and south. Also, that both the existing accesses to Little Abbotsford will be closed off, which are either side of the proposed access. It shows the 3 metre wide Northern Arc footway and cycleway along the frontage of the application site boundary adjoining Isaacs Lane. There are also trees to be removed as part of the Northern Arc proposals on the Isaacs Lane boundary. You can also see the indicative parking layout for 21 vehicles, which is in accordance with the parking standards. Slide 8. This is the refuse lorry and fire truck swept path plans. This drawing was requested by the Highway Authority to demonstrate that large vehicles such as fire engines and refuse lorries can safely enter and leave the site in forward gear. And slides 9 to 11 are the photographs I took on site. The first photograph is the existing property, Little Abbotsford. And the second photograph shows the existing driveway and access to the north of the dwelling. And these are the existing outbuildings, the building on the northern side and the building on the western side. And this is the western side of the existing dwelling and the rear garden to the west of the existing property. Finally, we have slide 12, which is the recommendations, recommendation A. It is recommended that consent is granted subject to the conditions outlined at Appendix A and the satisfactory completion of a Section 106 agreement to secure financial contributions for infrastructure improvements. Recommendation B is that if the applicants have not submitted a satisfactory signed 106 agreement or legal undertaken securing the necessary infrastructure payments by the 14th of July, then permission be refused at the discretion of the divisional lead for planning and economy for the reasons set out in the committee report. The main reasons for consideration are set out in the officer report. However, to sum up, the principle of the development is acceptable. Members will be well aware the legislation holds that the determination of a planning application shall be made in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The Mid-Sussex District Plan is up to date and the Council can demonstrate a 5-year supply of deliverable housing land. The proposed development will provide much needed additional housing for the Mid-Sussex District. For the purposes of planning policy, the application site is within the built-up area. The land surrounding the site on all boundaries is the Northern Arc development site. Homes England did not want to acquire the land to include within their Northern Arc development proposals. This outline application considers only the details for the access, with all other matters reserved for a subsequent application. After long and careful consideration with the Highway Authority, they have raised no objection to the details for access. This is subject to there being a Grampian planning condition to ensure that the proposed housing is not occupied until the Northern Arc Highway works to Isaacs Lane for traffic signals, footway works and speed limit change to 40 miles an hour are completed. This will also be subject to the satisfactory outcome of a traffic regulation order in this respect. Will Dorman, the Council's urban designer, has raised no objection to the latest indicative layout as shown on drawing revision G. There will be no adverse impact in relation to ecological or tree-related matters, and there will be additional opportunity for further landscaping at the reserved matters stage, albeit the indicative layout does illustrate landscaping proposals. There are no objections raised in relation to drainage matters. As such, these points are all neutral in the planning balance. In terms of 106 financial contributions, and as set out in the committee report, these will include 7,965 towards local community infrastructure provision and specifically for an electric car charging point which could be placed at Staplefield Common, Anstey Recreation Ground car park or in the lay-by at Brook Street. £17,480 is required to make improvements for children's playing space, which includes £9,500 for play equipment and £7,980 for kickabout provision for older children. £10,880 is required towards formal sport facilities at the Triangle Leisure Centre, and £6,240 is required as a community buildings contribution to make improvements to Shedding Dean Community Centre. In terms of the West Sussex County Council Education and Libraries contributions, as well as total access demand, these are formula-based due to it being an outline application. For education, West Sussex County Council has commented that the contributions generated by this proposal should be spent on fixtures, fittings and equipment at the new primary school 1 and the new secondary school 7, the Northern Arc Strategic Development, and on additional facilities at St Paul's Catholic College Sixth Form. For library infrastructure, West Sussex County Council has commented that the contributions generated by the proposal will be spent on the new Tier 7 library facilities being provided by the Northern Arc Strategic Development site or towards additional facilities at Burgess Hill Library. For the total access demand, West Sussex County Council has said that the contributions generated by this proposal will be spent on public realm and connectivity improvements in Burgess Hill Town Centre. It is considered that the proposed development meets all the relevant development plan and national planning policies. Given all of the above, this proposal is considered to be acceptable and should be granted planning permission. That brings my presentation to a close, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Members are probably not used to hearing about Section 106 in that, but I've been advised that a lot of members of the public, and sadly some of our councillors, not in this room, don't fully understand Section 106 and what it's going to be spent on. So from now on, until I'm told otherwise, you will have like an in-depth about the Section 106 monies from here on. Thank you. We do have a speaker, and I would like to call Nigel Alderton, and he's speaking on behalf of the application. Could you sit there, please? You have 2 minutes to speak. As soon as you press the button and start to speak, the traffic light system over here, operated by Zach, our legal officer, will come into play. You'll have a green light which will be on for 90 seconds, and in 30 seconds from the end of your 2 minutes, the amber light will come on, and at the end of that 30 seconds, the red light will come on. I will ask you to sum up in a sentence, please. So when you start speaking, that will start. Thank you. Can you just press that button as advised? The right-hand one.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Nigel Alderton from Prospective Planning, the planning agents on behalf of the applicant who owns the site. We are supporting the proposal and welcome the planning officer's very positive report. This is a fairly unique site, as you've just heard, in the sense that it's surrounded by land included within the Burgess Hill Northern Arc strategic development, but is not part of the planning permission for the larger area. It has been accepted by your officers, as you've just heard, that the land is now within the developed area of Burgess Hill. The application site is, or rather will be, located close to the approved Eastern Neighbourhood Centre for the Northern Arc, and the new Spine Road route is just to the south of the site. This outline proposal includes details of a new access onto Isaacs Lane, and this takes into account the improvements to the lane as a result of the wider development, and it's just close to the junction of Isaacs Lane and the new Link Road. Working closely with your officers and other consultees, we have sought to ensure that the scheme will integrate with and adhere to the established Northern Arc planning policy framework and design principles. We have submitted an illustrative layout to show how this can be achieved with 9 houses on the site. This layout includes appropriate parking, turning and servicing area, together with landscaping, and this has been clearly acknowledged in your officer's report. We have agreed appropriate conditions to make sure that the scheme is developed in conjunction with the wider Northern Arc development. We trust that you will accept the recommendations of your officers and grant planning permission for this proposal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Alderton. Would you like to take your seat again back now? Members, open the debate. Alpha.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, perhaps I just could make a general comment about the Northern Arc, and perhaps I could just make a comment to Mr. King. I wonder at some stage he could be kind enough with his officers to bring councillors up to date with what's actually going on in the Northern Arc and what's being proposed, because there are lots of comment in here that this is there, this is that, but simply put, I'm aware of the Northern Arc, but the detail then is a mystery to me, I'm afraid. And I think it would be helpful for all councillors if they were aware what's over the fence. But not to discuss now, Mr. Chairman.
No. I've actually had an email from Acorn, telling us the state of play, where we're at. I thought that would have gone to all members. I suppose I was part of the cabinet when we voted for that to go through, and I'm on the distribution list. If it would help, we could get that email sent out to all members. Yeah, we'll do that. And they will tell you exactly what stages they're at, and where the, progress. So I'm surprised it hasn't gone out, but I was, like I said, I was a member of the cabinet when we decided the Northern Arc had to proceed. So I'm surprised, but you've just heard, we'll get action so that all members can get the Acorn update. And they're the government preferred body who are doing the Northern Arc.
Right. That's very good of you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you. Would you prefer me to make my comments on all the points, or would you prefer one by one?
All the points.
Right, okay.
How many have you got first?
It's under 600, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, that's all right then. All of them then.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm not entirely comfortable with this application. The reason for that is that I can see why it's been designed as it is, but of course you've got an area where all the parking is going to be, which you cannot see from the housing, and normally the police comment adversely on areas where effectively are not easily visible by the public, and I do believe it could then lead in longer term to vandalism. So that's my first comment on that. And also, of course, the houses are being built up against a very busy road today, not alone when there's going to be 3,500 more houses and those vehicle movements. I do not believe that those houses are going to enjoy peace and quiet. You'd be disappointed if I didn't ask about electrical charging.
I can tell you that. Paragraph 11, page 37.
Thank you. And the sustainability of heating, if it goes through, I would hope that that is going to be of a standard that it is sustainable, and that we're looking at tiling and heat pumps. And
I think that will be done at reserved matters, that stage.
I think it is, but it's a comment, Mr. Chairman, which I hope the officers will take on
I'm sure
on
she's
board.
listening to you.
So, if I might...
Before we go to the next one, Councillor Pulford, can you just indicate what car parking spaces are you worried about? Is it the line at the bottom or the ones to the side or by the houses?
As I understand it, Mr. Chairman, and I'm very happy to be delighted to be corrected, but the houses as I see it are laid out in
An inverted L?
in an inverted L, and that being so, the parking is all down here to the left.
No, there's
down
not. There's some lot there. There's parking there, behind the houses. I just point out.
All right, okay, yes.
Cursor.
Right, but that, thank you, Mr. Chairman, but you see, I don't believe that for comfortable living, the first thing you've got to do when people have youngsters and they're shopping is they park their car in one place and they trudge off to their houses in another. And I don't think it's compatible with modern day living. Right, we've done
It is
that.
only an indicative layout. It's not saying it's exactly, so that's right, is it? Rachel, could you just, no, do it in a minute, we'll answer that question in a minute. Right, could you just switch off your speaker a second? I'm just going to get the officer just to answer that particular question.
Thank you, Chairman. It is an indicative layout, so the details of the layout can be dealt with at the Reserved Matters application. But you can see, though, that it's completely overlooked because these are 3-storey houses and they'll have windows at the rear and facing out onto the car parking area. And this layout was actually achieved with the help of Will Dorman, the urban designer, in accordance with the Mid-Sussex Design Guide. And it is it's revision G. So we did everything we could to comply with that Mid-Sussex Design Guide.
And I think also, if you saw, there was another entrance to the south of that. So these houses really are going to be copies of what's going to be in that area anyway. So if you imagine this is just one part of the jigsaw for the Northern Arc, which is these Homes England didn't purchase. Does that make... Okay, do you want to put your microphone back on again, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When it comes to the construction phrase, I would ask that there's wheel washing facilities in there. And I would also ask that all construction traffic be parked on site, because that, again, is going to be a very busy road. Mr. Chairman, the trouble is already, you see.
That's okay. That's all right.
And then on page 43, there seems to be a little bit of confusion about the foul water drainage as to whether that's going into a sewer or not a sewer. The penultimate paragraph, perhaps a little clarification of that would be useful. And when it comes on to page 49 there, we've got waste contractors, and there's two things which I'd like some comfort on, and that is the entrance or exit, well, it's the exit, sorry, Mr. Chairman, from the site onto Isaacs Lane. And I would wish some confirmation that the turning circle or radius, call whatever it is, between curb to curb, is sufficient to allow certainly a vehicle the size of the waste contractor to be able to turn, but be able also to maintain staying on the same side of the road. And the reason I make that comment, Mr. Chairman, is experience that we have in my own ward, where the new distances are nowhere near adequate, and effectively everybody has to drive, even in a car, has to drive over the pavements, and they are already breaking, and we'll be asking West Sussex to make those pavements back up to a suitable standard. But it is all because the blue book, or whatever book it is, says that's just fine. But of course, in reality, and again, because it's a busy road, everybody has to make sure that they're staying this side of the imaginary white line. So I need to have some comfort about that, Mr. Chairman. And Southern Water don't seem to be that comfortable on page 59 either. And Southern Water on page 67 again. And that's about it, Mr. Chairman. You'll be relieved to know.
Could you just confirm the width of the road?
Well, it's the width of the exit, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, Isaac...
Yeah, I see what you mean, yeah, because you don't want them to swing out into oncoming traffic.
Absolutely. And the other thing I can't quite see, Mr. Chairman, because you keep saying we can get to the Northern Arc. I don't see how people are going to walk down Isaac's Lane because there is not a path.
I think when there is...
Sorry, Rebecca.
I think because you're the overlooking... Could you switch off your mic, please? I think within the Northern Arc, there's going to be an awful lot of new pavements, and I think, as you heard about the Grampian, that's because it's going to become a 30 zone. Is that correct?
40 miles an hour.
40 mile an hour zone. That's not ideal, I must admit. But there are an awful lot of footpaths being put along that road when the Northern Arc comes into its fruition. But anyway, let the officer answer a couple of those questions, because there was quite a few of them there.
Right, okay. Shall I go back to the beginning?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I may have missed some points out, but I'll try and do as best I can to cover them. And if I do miss things out, then you're going to have to remind me. But you started with wheel washing. So that could be a condition that could be added if it hasn't already. That is something that highways would usually include as a condition if it's necessary and reasonable to do so. So that's that point dealt with. You mentioned about all construction traffic being parked on site. It's my understanding that the application site is the land within the Redditch boundary, and therefore they would have to park on site. But again, there will be a condition that usually requires and is in this part of this permission for a construction management plan. And that usually organises the parking and movement of materials, etc., in relation to construction as part of the proposal. So that should be covered under that condition. In terms of foul water and drainage, again, that's a detail that would be picked up at the reserve matters stage. You meant you were seeking clarity in terms of foul water and where it was going. It's my understanding at this stage that they are implying that the drainage will be into a ditch, and they've carried out survey work to prove that the ditch is there, and that will link up with the northern arc near the access. But again, as I say, that's a detail that will be covered at the reserve matters application. Southern water, not sure, Steve, if you can actually mention about the southern water aspect of it. I mean, again, it's not a detail that's included at this stage because we're just looking mainly at access. Southern water is usually an informative that they have to comply with the requirements of southern water. That's usually how that's dealt with. I can't remember where you went from there. Did you ask about the footway? The footway is actually shown on this drawing. There's a cycleway and a footway along here.
I'm not looking to be facetious, but does it actually link with something? Because we see so many new pathways go in, but where does it go? Into a field?
Proposals, which we don't have on this particular drawing, so I can't give you the detail of that, but it is shown on this drawing and there will be provision for it.
Could we, when we do the reserve matters, and it will come back to this committee, could we make sure that Councillor Pulfer's concerns about the footpath are linked up, show an indicative where they are going to link up on the Northern Arc part?
Okay,
Not across the whole site, but just down the I6 lanes part of it.
Yeah.
Because I think we did that, didn't we, with the Woodford, further up the road?
Woodfield House.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. On the Woodfield House, there was a planning condition requiring details of how the path would link up with the as yet to be built next phase of the Northern Arc, so it didn't become a path that.
Mr. Chairman, and I would be content with that, but you also said that the matters will come back to this committee.
Well, reserve matters will come back to us.
Okay, well, I'll be content to review it then.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If we're doing the outline permission, then we will do the reserve matters as well. And that's the design stage, whether we like the buildings or not. You know, do we like their shape, size, whatever. Okay, right. You just switch off your mic. Does anybody else wish to? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. Just like to thank Rachel for a very clear presentation, and I wonder if she could just expand a little bit for me on what this Grampian actually means in just a few more words. Thank you.
Is that Tom? Do you no, it's planning officers do it. Yeah.
Chairman. It's a condition that's a requirement from the Highway Authority at the County Council, and it's to ensure that the provisions of the signals, the speed limit and the highway works are all established prior to the houses being occupied to ensure that the road safety element is met prior to the site being, prior to the houses being occupied, and that's it in a nutshell, really. Just to ensure that highway safety is met.
I'm just going to add that there is an expansion to that as well, and Mr. King's going to expand on that as well.
Yeah, thank you. Just in general, the term, when we refer to Grampian conditions, it just means that it's a condition that's negatively worded that requires details to be submitted to the planning authority before works or an action can take place. So quite often it's used in relation to drainage works, because you can use that type of condition to require works to take place off-site. So it might be no development should take place until X, Y, and Z has occurred. So it's typically details before works commence. So that's what Grampian means, basically.
We've used it quite often across the district. I'm thinking of some sites in your ward, the Taylor Wimpey site, we insisted on it. Councillor Cartwright.
Yes, just a little background question. Do we know why Northern Ark Homes England didn't buy up this bit of land?
I should imagine the costs. They spent an awful lot of money. There was little pockets they didn't take up. They didn't do Woodford House. They didn't do this. I think there was a couple of other little bits. There's a very few little bits and pieces. The landowner, it wasn't in the 3 or 4 main landowners at the time. That's correct, wasn't it? We had 3 or 4 landowners, but in amongst the whole of the Ark, there were little pockets that they didn't actually own, and that's why it didn't get included.
We keep getting the pockets coming up.
We get the pockets, unfortunately. Yes, we are getting the pockets. Right, I have no further questions, so we'll go to the votes, please. The voting is the normal way. If you agree with it, it's the green button. If you don't, it's the yellow button. If you abstain, it's the red button. You okay with that? All 6? Unanimous? Yeah. Okay, well, that's unanimous. That has been approved. Thank you very much, Mr. Alderton. 1 minute. Yep. Well, we've got to clear the bits and pieces. We've got to bring the new officer in as well. Here's Rachel. Yeah, go back that way. Yeah. Ready? Thank you. Right. This is DM 213755. It's item 6 on the agenda. There is some to do with updates on here, which no doubt be referenced by the planning officer. So, if you're okay with reading it, we have got some updates on this one, and this one's yours, Joe.
Chairman, so just to draw members' attention to the update sheet, under Appendix A for the recommended conditions, Condition 6 is to be deleted because it's been addressed in one of the submitted drawings, and also Condition 15 for landscaping is to be reworded because there was a couple of duplicate words in there.
Thank you.
So planning permission is sought for the demolition of buildings and the erection of 13 dwellings, along with parking and landscaping at Court Meadow School, Hanley Lane, Cookfield. So the application site is here, outlined in red, as per my cursor. comprises of the grounds of the former Court Meadow School, accessed from Hanley Lane. This is the exit point here, and this is the entrance from here. The school buildings are vacant and have been boarded up for some time. And as well as the school buildings, outbuildings, there's large areas of tarmac to the front and to the rear here. Within the immediate area, there is countryside here to the north, as well as to the east. And then to the south and the west, we have got the West Sussex County Council building of Orchard House, which is a residential children's home, and you've got residential properties here of Horsegate House and Orchard Lodge. Within the site, there is a vehicular access onto Hanley Lane, which is used as an exit, and outside here to the west is the two-way traffic, which serves other development of Horsegate House, Orchard House, and also what was the school for the entrance as well. Further to the west, running alongside Hanley Lane here, it is a pedestrian footpath which connects up to Whiteman's Green and Cookfield itself. The site is allocated within the Cookfield Neighbourhood Plan under policy CNP 6A for residential development for approximately 10 dwellings. Details of the requirements of this policy is set out on page 79 of the report. The site plan, the proposal is to comprise of 9 market houses and 4 affordable dwellings. The development would provide 30% affordable housing. The dwellings themselves would front onto this internal access road here, and there would be areas of landscaping retained on Hanley Lane and to the east here, as well as internal landscaping proposed as well. There would be a total of 37 car parking spaces within the site, with a car parking courtyard to serve 5 properties, tandem parking for a number of properties, with this plot here having side-by-side car parking. 9 of the parking spaces would be for unallocated visitor spaces. Each dwelling would also have a storage shed to provide 2 secure cycle parking spaces. These green marked areas here for these 4 plots are to have a detached single-storey flat-roofed garden room in the rear gardens. The existing access point here on Hanley Lane would be widened to 5.5 metres to provide an in-out access, and there would also be a pedestrian footpath between plots 2 and 3 here to link onto the footpath here to allow pedestrian access to Cookfield and Whiteman's Green. The internal roadway will also allow access as existing to Orchard House as well. Boundary trees and vegetation are to be retained. So there's quite a lot of slides for the elevations, so I won't dwell on them all. Plans show that the dwellings would be constructed in brick with a mixture of sweet chestnut, horizontal boarding, clay tile hanging, diaper brick pattern, brickwork with clay tiled roofs, rib metal links between plots 1 and 2, and the properties would have dark grey aluminium windows and doors and cladding panels, as well as dark grey rainwater goods. The council's urban designer has considered the proposal and has raised no objection to the scheme. The proposal has been designed to offer a character that, whilst different to those dwellings and buildings close to the site, appropriately respond to their mid-Sussex context by employing local or natural materials and an architectural features such as cat-slide roofs and diaper brick patterns. In addition, the dwellings are of a relatively modest scale, and the variations in the design and elevational treatment of the properties would add to the visual interest of the proposed cul-de-sac. Due to the dwellings being set within the site with boundary screening along Hanley Lane, it's considered that the development would sit comfortably within the site and retain a verdant character of the street scene. Details of sustainable measures to be incorporated in the development are detailed on page 89 of the report. This is a fabric-first approach incorporating passive solar gain, natural daylighting, water efficiency measures. Conditions are suggested in Appendix 1 in relation to each dwelling having covered and secure cycle parking and details on electric charging vehicle points. So here's some slides of the photos of the existing site. As you can see, Court Meadow Primary School is a brick single-storey building with a large area of hard standing to the front. This is taken from the existing in-out access outside of the red line of the site. And this is the view from the access which is to be retained and provide the in-out access for the development along Hanley Lane. This is the existing access for Orchard House. So you can see this is the boundary at the moment, and which is to be retained of Court Meadow School. These are views within Court Meadow School showing the existing buildings, the hard standing, and also the trees. This is the trees on the eastern boundary, which backs onto fields. Of residential development on this site is established through its allocation in the neighbourhood plan. The development will make use of a brownfield site. The development will require a number of infrastructure contributions, which are detailed on page 94 of the report. These are as follows. Primary education, £50,928, to be spent on additional facilities at Holy Trinity C of E Primary School in Cookfield. Secondary education, £54,813, to be spent on additional facilities at Warden Park Secondary Academy. Libraries, £5,244, to be spent on providing additional facilities at Haywards Heath Library. TAD, £35,148, to be spent on Haywards Heath Circular Cycle Route, providing links to Haywards Heath Railway Station and Warden Park Secondary School. Children's playing equipment, £13,240, to be spent on improvements to the play equipment at Chapel Fields and or Cookfield Recreation Ground. Kickabout provision of £11,121, to be spent on improved facilities at Chapel Fields and or Cookfield Recreation Ground. Formal sport, £16,111, to be spent towards formal sport facilities at Whiteman's Green. Community buildings, £9,240, to be spent on improvements to Haywards Heath Rugby Football Club Pavilion. And the local community infrastructure contribution of £10,185 to convert the front of Cookfield Village Hall on London Lane to provide 3 parking spaces. The proposal shows that 13 dwellings can be suitably accommodated within the site. The proposed layout, design and scale is considered appropriate and would not form an overdevelopment of the site. Officers consider that the proposal would provide a high-quality development which is well laid out with sufficient parking and well-spaced plots. The development is considered to sit comfortably within the site. The district plan and the MPPF seeks proposals to optimise the potential of the site, and the proposed numbers and layout is considered appropriate in this instance. It's considered the proposal would not detract from the visual qualities and essential characteristics of the nearby Highwold AONB, which is to the north, and no significant harm would be caused to the amenities of the surrounding residential occupiers through overlooking, loss of outlook, and the scheme would not cause harm in terms of parking or highway safety. Officers consider that in the context of the district and neighbourhood plan, the proposed development of the site complies with the development plan, and there are no material planning considerations indicating a decision should be made otherwise in accordance with it. Just to draw members' attention that there is a dual recommendation, to approve it subject to the satisfactory completion of a Section 106 legal agreement, which is being progressed at the moment. However, if that has not been progressed, we have the option that we could refuse the application due to it not being secured. That brings my presentation to the end. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Joe. Very good presentation, as always. Mr. Rainier. You don't have to point out the public speaking role. You've done it many, many times. As soon as you start speaking, the green light goes on.
Yes, Chairman, members. As you've heard, these proposals deliver the site allocation identified in the Cookfield Neighbourhood Plan and will replace the existing utilitarian structures with high-quality residential development, delivering 13 dwellings, 4 of which will be affordable. The majority of dwellings proposed are individually designed and will incorporate locally sourced materials seeking to reflect local character. The dwellings will be framed within an attractive landscape structure, which has taken opportunities to enhance the ecology of the site by varied planting, including replacement of non-native species with native hedgerow planting and retention of a landscaped edge to Hanley Lane. It's considered that the attractive dwellings will enhance the site and will be a significant betterment over the existing single-storey structures and large expanses of hard standing. In accordance with the Cookfield Neighbourhood Plan, the proposals have incorporated a twitten allowing easy access and cycle access for pedestrians and cycles to facilities along London Road in the centre of Cookfield. In terms of sustainability, the dwellings have taken a fabric-first approach and will incorporate air source heat pumps, meaning that no gas will be used in the properties. On average, the dwellings will receive a 43% betterment over requirements of the building regulations. In addition, the majority of dwellings will benefit from an active electric vehicle charging point, a significant increase over West Sussex standards. Consequently, it's considered that the proposal will make effective use of this allocated and previously developed site and will ensure the delivery of affordable homes, along with a mixture of smaller family homes, and will be a significant benefit to the local community. It's been demonstrated that the proposed development will not have a significant effect on the character of the area or on local views. Indeed, we believe that it will have a positive effect on some local views. As you've heard, there are no objections to the proposals from Cookfield Parish Council, who are supportive of the scheme. Therefore, hope that you will agree with your officer recommendation and grant permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, this is a very good use of a brownfield site in accordance with the NPPF. And I'm particularly pleased that we're getting 4 affordable units on here. And just to remind members, if you haven't read it yourself, I'm sure you have, we had no letters of representation against this site, and obviously the Cookfield Parish Council have no objection because it's one of their allocated sites. Does anybody wish to speak at all? Councillor Brown.
I took the opportunity. Oh, I'm going to have to drink some water. Yeah, I took the opportunity to visit the site, and I walked from Chapel Fields to the site along the footpath, which is a behind the hedge path, which is quite narrow. And in so doing, I found somebody running in the opposite direction, and I had to sort of stand behind one of the lampposts to allow them to go past, recognising, of course, social distancing, but it's quite a narrow path. And as we just heard mention of the idea that you might want to cycle along that path, well, I don't think that would be feasible because it's just not wide enough, and of course it's a public footpath, so it would be incorrect to do so. I had a look at I'd cycle along that road myself, not frequently, but from time to time, and we've seen the average speed there is 39, 85 percentile speed is 39 miles an hour past the entrance to the site. And so it's fine, in my opinion, to cycle, to turn left and cycle into Cookfield. But there's a bit of a serious problem if you're cycling from Cookfield in an easterly direction, and you want to turn into the new turning provision, principally because the road is the highway is narrow, and it's got fast-moving traffic, and there's no way normally on a road like that. I wouldn't consider turning right and going to the middle of the road, even in daylight. I'd stop at the side and look behind me and then go across. But the carriageway width is so small. So we've got cycling provision on site, but I don't see really anybody being able to safely cycle and use that facility as it stands at the moment. The splay seems to have been the consideration, really the only consideration seems to have been the vehicles, i.e. cars and lorries and vehicles turning, not cycles. And in fact, I looked at the preliminary safety report by Pell Frischman, and I don't know whether it's worth putting that up, but I can say what it says. It doesn't even mention cycling at all. There's a main heading, but on page 5, there's actually no consideration of cycling at all. And then, if I just run through the report, on page 71, try not to make a lot of noise. The officer's recommendation is there will be a neutral impact in respect of highway safety. So I beg to differ on that. On page 78, rightly, we have in the bullets at the bottom, the main issues for consideration are access, parking and highway safety. Correct. 85, we have access, DP21, appropriate opportunities to facilitate and promote the increased use of alternative means of transport to the private car, such as the provision of and access to safe and convenient routes for walking, cycling and public transport. So we have a reasonable walking route. It's lit and it's connected. I'm very pleased to see that with the layout between plots 1 and 2. Further down, we've got the scheme protects the safety of road users and pedestrians. Well, I beg to differ on that. 86, on page 86, we have section 110 of the NPPF, and a B there, safe and suitable access to the site can be achieved for all users. And the County Council assessment, consultation response, it says, it makes the point that the developer hasn't provided that yet, but it makes the point that all arrangements have been safely audited. Problems were raised, which have since been addressed by the designer and the audit team. All problems shown as being resolved in the planning documents. Well, I can't see that they are, since there's no mention of cycling, and this problem with being able to turn in. So I think this verdant, I'm just quoting now, the verdant appearance of Hanley Lane, which is disguising the development, and it's I have to say it's a lovely development, but I wouldn't personally like to approve this unless I was completely satisfied that these matters had been properly attended to. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I know this road incredibly well, and I mean incredibly well. The main problem is further to the east as they start the series of bends. This part of the road tends to be, and in my judgment, accident-free. I have encountered cyclists in my previous profession up and down this road. In fact, it's actually one of the routes on the Haywards Heath cycle rate when they do their cycle day. I have actually seen cyclists use the one you mentioned, the footpath. It's not the most used footpath on the planet, and it has been used, and you met a runner from that, and it's not the widest either. But the fact of the matter is, it's probably the safest of the footpaths we've actually got in this part of the world, because it's actually behind a hedge, so you can use it. And just because you're on a bike or just because you're running or you're walking, you haven't got the God-given right, you've got the right of way. Sometimes you do have to stop. I wouldn't know about turning into the site because I've never had to turn into the site on a bike, but I have turned in applications down at Holgate House there. So you can do it. I hear what you're coming from, ideally, but you've got to think that they can only provide a wider footpath if they actually had ownership of the bit of footpath. I think that's something that the county council, it's probably county council land there, and it's perhaps some of the money that has been earmarked, but it's the Hayward Heath cycle route between Warden Park, the main school in that part of the world, down to the railway station. You've got to weigh out where that money is going to be spent. Is it going to be spent on, I would suggest, not as many people using that footpath, or a greater proportion of the people using the footpath coming from Warden Park to the school, but I am but one person. But I'm just giving my experience of going up down Hanley Lane probably 2 or 3 times a day, and still go up there frequently. But Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Chairman. As you know, I'm always on that we never take any notice of neighbourhood plans unless it's convenient for mid-Sussex. So I'm actually pleased that it's actually in the Cuckfield neighbourhood plan, this development. Cuckfield Parish Council have got no objections, and there's no summary of representations at all. So I can't see anything wrong with this at all, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Councillor Pulfer.
It's a brownfield site. It's a good use of the land, and it needs to be supported. There is a but, and it really comes back to people walking along that road. Even in this document, it points out that the speeding, that the limits there are in excess of 30 miles an hour, and there's just a hope that people might slow down. So 2 things. One, I would hope that this turning circle, as it comes out of the site for larger vehicles, can all be on, that the radius is wide enough. Radius wide enough? No, that's not quite right. I can't remember.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, I think it's the axis, isn't it? Let's go back to school geometry. It is wide enough to allow that because of the speed of the traffic, which is going, in fact, to the east, to go down to the other end of it. And again, it is quite a narrow road. So I would hope that that will be addressed, because I think the photographs will show that there's no pathways along that bit.
You can't see it because it's behind a hedge, the footpath is.
Oh, is it?
Yes, you've got the road, hedge, footpath,
And then
field,
it continues on down into Cuckfield?
all the way up to Chapel Fields.
Right.
And it joins up with you can't see it as you drive along there because it's
All
behind
right,
the
okay,
hedge.
I'll take that as read then, Mr. Chairman, and I'm sure that will just be done. And the other thing, I'm assuming there are electrical charging points for all the houses, or all the parking spots.
Yeah.
Thank you.
In a minute. He's going through the report again.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Chairman, I read the thing, wheel washing, if we can make sure that that's in there. And again, we can't afford to have any construction traffic parked on that road. And that, Mr. Chairman, will be relieved to know is it.
It's a big enough facility to put all constructions on that site there, I should imagine. But anyway, I'll let the officer answer.
Thank you, Chairman. So thank you for clarifying about the footpath. There is a footpath that will link on from the development onto the highway that is there. The Highways Authority have raised no objection about the access. Visibility displays are acceptable, and so that is acceptable in highway safety. With regards to electric charging vehicle points, condition 18 covers that. And we have got a condition about site construction, but we could include wheel washing in that.
I think so.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I mean, what I do like about this is it's, as Mr. Rainier pointed out, it's no gas on this site at all. It's all done in-house, basically. A lot of it is. I mean, that is what we should be aiming for all our developments. So I've got nobody else. Mr. Councillor Cartwright suddenly sneaked in before we. Oh, yeah.
You took the words out of my mouth. I was impressed by the high standard of the building, and I think we should be aiming with more houses to avoid gas, etc.
Well, in light of the problems that the country and the world is, well, certainly Europe is experiencing anyway. Okay, thank you. Right, we'll go to, I'll read out the recommendations. The recommendation is on page 71. Recommendation A is recommended that the planning permission is be approved subject to completion of a satisfactory section 106 legal agreement, secure the infrastructure contributions and affordable housing, and the conditions set out in Appendix A. And recommendation B, it is recommended if the applicants have not submitted a satisfactory signed plan obligation, securing the necessary infrastructure payments and affordable housing by the 14th of July of this year, and it's recommended that the permission be refused at the discretion of the divisional lead or planning economically for the following reasons. The application fails to comply with the policies DP20, DP31 of the Mid-Sussex District Plan in respect of the infrastructure and affordable housing required to serve the development. Can we signify in our normal way, please, if you agree? We have 5 for and 1 abstention. Thank you. That has been approved. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, you against? Yellow, isn't it? Yellow. It's red. Okay, I do apologise. So that is 5 for and 1 against. Sorry about that, Councillor Brown. You don't need to, that bit you do, because Mr. Rainier's coming back. Thank you. That's been approved. We've had this before. It's DM 220204 is here before us because the original application came in front of this committee and we granted planning permission, but the officers felt that there is a slight material different, change that needed to be debated by ourselves. So, Anna, this one's yours. Thank you.
Chairman. So first of all, I'll go to the update sheet for members, and just to advise, on page 137, the ecological advisor has recommended a condition is imposed requiring compliance with the recommendations of the ecology report, which has already been approved under the discharge of conditions application DM 213720, which was in reference to condition 20 of DM 212367. And he has reworded the condition to make that reference to that as set out in the update sheet. And also on page 164, the landscaping details planned reference is to change to a revision D, which was dated the 29th of March.
and also to add a landscaping maintenance plan into the list of approved plans, which was received at the same time, the 29th of the 3rd, 20. So this application seeks full planning permission for the development of 2 new dwellings on this site at Little Park Farm. And the site was subject of the earlier application that Councillor Marsh referred to, DM 212367, and that was considered by the Planning Committee on the 9th of September last year. And at that time, the site area was larger than the site area is now. The site formerly accommodated a dairy building, a mobile home and associated structures on the land, and a Dutch barn, which now remains on the site. And I'll show you where. So we have a Dutch barn here, which remains on the site and is now outside of the red line of this boundary. And works are now progressing on the 2 new dwellings on the site. This application is before committee as there have been a number of changes to the approved scheme, which includes the addition of garages for units B and C and changes to the plot boundaries and design alterations to the Unit C dwelling. So on the site location plan, the site is outlined in red and includes a site access route which is up here and comes off Marchant's Close, to the north of the site. This access is also used as a public path to build to the new dwellings over at what was called Bramble Park, or is now Idenhurst, and the open area of land over here to the east of the site, which is known as Hurst Meadows. The existing access route, or a secondary route, I should say, to Little Park, which is a listed building over here, there's a secondary sort of access point that truncates through the site, and that will be maintained through the site here. A former track which ran across from the old Red Barn and across here has actually been taken into Plot B now, so that route will no longer exist. That Little Park here is a Grade 2 star listed building. The second plan is the landscaping plan, which, just for members' information, it illustrates that the boundaries of the site at Unit B and the boundary of the site at Unit C are to be surrounded with some new indigenous planting and post rail fencing, and then this area of the site is to be maintained as a paddock area, which corresponds with the previous proposal. So no real change in terms of that element. This is the garage. Oh, I'll just nip back and show you. This is the proposed garage that is to be added to Unit B, which is on the line of the old access track. And Unit C is to be extended with a garage here and also some dormer windows within this roof space. So that's the sort of main areas of change. This is the garage that is proposed to the north of Unit B. These elevations show that the garage building is to be constructed with a brick plinth and timber clad with a tile roof with matching materials to those on Units B and C. This is the revised elevation now, a set of elevations for Unit C. It illustrates that dormer windows are to be added and a garage element added to the form of the building. A slight increase in the ridge level and the eaves level to accommodate the rooms within the roof space. This building illustrates that within the loft area you'll get 2 bedrooms and some additional shower room facilities. Overall, the size of the building is still a 3-bed dwelling. Slide illustrates the tree protection measures that are in place on site. And then these photographs, just for members of information, this is a view from Marchant's Close, and you can just see the peak of the top of the roof of Unit B being constructed. This is the access coming into the site. This is Unit C ahead of us here. Unit B under construction, well underway, with the roof going on, tiling happening at this moment, I think. And this is the old route of the access track where the proposed garage is to be put in here. View of the Unit C, which has been partially constructed. Obviously they've stopped because the roof may be changing with the introduction of the dormer windows. So that just gives you an idea of that. And the recommendation is that consent is granted subject to the conditions outlined in Appendix A. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Anna. Huge changes from the one we've granted, is it really? Mr. Rainier, take your place, please. As always, as soon as you start speaking, the green light will come on.
Thank you, Chairman, members. I think I can be brief. The existing permission has been implemented, as you've seen, and work is progressing on the site. Therefore, in my view, the only issue to consider is the changes to the approved and half-implemented scheme. The addition of 2 garages and the addition of first-floor accommodation within the roof space with those resultant design revisions to one of the 2 dwellings. It's considered that those changes are minor in nature and that the design remains of a high quality. The buildings are appropriate to this semi-rural location and have no greater impact on the setting of the listed building to the west, given the intervening barn, and that the dormers and gable additions are to the opposite side. Your officer's report concludes that the proposal would not cause significant loss of residential amenity to any neighbours, that the extant permissions are an important material planning consideration. The public benefits of providing a well-designed comprehensive development of this site outweighs any limited harm to the listed building. Overall, the planning application complies with the development plan when read as a whole, and that the scheme is for 2 dwellings in a sustainable location that accords with policy DP12, and that there are not considered to be any other material considerations which would indicate the application should be refused. And so given that conclusion from your officers, I trust that you will support that recommendation and grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rainier. You were brief. Members, before we go to debate, if you recall, we had quite a debate about the transport going to and from past the school, if you recall. And just to remind you, it's on page 136, the town council, parish council observations, they wish to have that, and that's not changed at all. We still have the safety feature of children and be able to go to and from the school without dodging construction lorries and other traffic. So with that in mind, does anybody wish to speak? Because I think this is just minor, but it's your prerogative. Does anybody wish to speak? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. I understand.
Might want to drink before you start.
I did. I'm just old and croaky. So the barn conversion is now. Then my question is, that's disappeared. That was the one thing that I thought was at the last occasion we discussed this. I thought was useful and appropriate because it had solar panels and that encouraged me. But anyway, I'm informed that the standard of construction is meets with DP 39, so we won't go into that again. But I'm read there's a very significant objection from a nearby resident, which I've read. Saying that it's completely changed the conservation officer's report last time. Of course, these look out over the open fields, and they'll be much more significant now with a first story. And I wonder why at the previous application they were not shown thus. So I feel that it's rather wasting the time of the planning committee, and I don't understand why, if it's almost permitted development to put dormers in a situation like this, why it's actually come to the planning committee. Perhaps the officer might explain that. 136, the question. Well, as I say, the conservation officer's report says it will cause less than substantial harm, and then refers to paragraph 202. Is that the MPPF? So that was my final question. Thank you.
Okay. It was deemed, thank you, Councillor Brown. We'll do the paragraph 202. I think it is the MPPF, but we'll clarify that in a second. It was deemed to come back to the planning committee because we dealt with it last time, and for transparency reasons, it was felt this committee should look at it again, even though technically it could have done by delegated powers, but I might have got that horribly wrong. Do you want to, Steve?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. The scheme of delegation to officers does allow officers to deal with minor changes to approved schemes. In this instance, it was our view that it was quite balanced, but we felt that it probably should come back to the committee because the changes were significant enough in terms of how they should be dealt with procedurally, that it should come back to the committee. But for the reasons that are set out in the report, the scheme itself is acceptable, and that's why it's recommended for approval. That's from the MPPF.
Yeah.
And just on permitted development rights for future extensions and so on, permitted development rights only come into being once a dwelling is finished. So permitted development rights apply to dwelling houses. You can't exercise any permitted development rights until a dwelling is in existence. And obviously at the moment we're still at the construction phase, so there isn't a new dwelling on the site at the moment.
Are you happy with that answer? The recommendation is relatively simple. It is outlined behind me and behind yourself there. It's recommended that consent be granted subject to the conditions outlined in Appendix A. You all normal way, green if you like it. Against. So can I see who? You voted against it? Again, okay, thank you. Right, this application has been approved. Thank you, Anna. Anything back from Councillor Eggleston, so it'll have to be marked down as absent. Okay. No, nor of you. Busy man, obviously. In around. Joe. Are you ready to go in a second? This item, agenda item 8, it's DM 220220, and it's the Haven Sports Club car park, Sportsfield car park at the Haven Centre, Hop House Lane, Crawley Down. Just remind members, the reason this is here is that we are the landowners. Go, it's all yours.
Thank you, Chairman. We have no updates on the update sheet for this application. The application is seeking to vary condition 2 of application DM 203296, and this is to reduce the height and the design of the roof over the badminton court, change the external materials, and to reduce the distance between the car parking rows. Permission has already been granted by committee for the village hall under the original consent DM 192671. As such, the principle's already been established, and in this case, we're only considering the variation of condition, and that's looking at the design and character and neighbouring amenity. The plan here shows the site outlined in red. We have the Haven farmhouse to the eastern side, recreation ground to the north, we've got Hophurst Lane to the south, and properties of context. This is the design of what has previously been approved. Just to sort of make note of the roof, which is being reduced. So looking at the proposed plan, we can see that the height of overall height has been reduced, more of a barn hip style. In addition to this, they're seeking to make some amendments to the materials, changing to a cedral cladding and a roof tile with Ibstock facing brickwork. The other amendment they're seeking to do is the distance between the parking bays was originally proposed at 9 metres. This is now being reduced to 7.5, so it's actually reducing the amount of tarmac surface. Owing to the reduction of the sort of height of the building, the mix of materials within the wider character of the area, and also reduction in the actual car parking area, it's considered to be appropriate design, size and scale, and is not considered to cause any harm to the neighbouring amenities. Just for context, we've got the first photo here from the site. It's an existing car park area. We're looking over to Haven Farmhouse to the east. The second photo is looking north to the recreation ground. This photo here is looking west towards the Haven Gardens, and the final photo is looking south towards Hophurst Lane. The main issues have been set out within the report, and it is recommended that consent is granted subject to the conditions outlined in Appendix A. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Joe. Just to remind members, you could read it as well as I can. The Parish Council support this application, where previously they were, should we say, antsy about it last time, but they now support this application. Does anybody wish to speak?
I would just like confirmation that the hall can still accommodate playing badminton, with the reduction of the roof because there's a dearth of halls in the area where you can play badminton. And the other thing is, again, just confirmation. I see that the car parking distances have been changed, but given the size of the cars which we are now delivered by the manufacturers, is there the swinging area so that when you reverse out, or whichever way you're going to do, there is room without you doing a three-point turn? In other words, just without scrubbing the tires and scrubbing all the tarmac up as well, which just will need to be replaced. So it's confirmation on those 2 points. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
One would think, Councillor Pulver, you might have had an issue with cars recently. The line of your questions in.
No, I haven't, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, pleased to see the scaling back of the building. It's sensible because you know, I did feel with the original building they were going to have problems raising sufficient funds to get it built. So doing what they're doing, I feel is quite sensible, and they're still going to be stretched, but it is a far more realistic plan.
I agree. I actually like the new design more so than the older design personally. Councillor Brown. You switch off your...
Thank you, Chairman. Got a couple of little questions. Is the footprint of the building the same as the previous footprint? And has the footprint moved on the plot? I ask those questions because several of the objectors were making suggestions that that is what had happened. Also draw Joseph's attention to page 184 at the bottom. It's the proposed use of Ibstock West Hoveley multi-stock bricks. Well, the brickworks has been closed for 2 years now, so that's incorrect. And I visited the site myself, and I was surprised to find there was no site notice there either, which is peculiar. Well, I say there's no site notice. The previous one was there, but the current one, the DM 220220, wasn't there, which... and then finally, another question, with regard to the football pitches at the back. I mean, his old hat now, but where's everybody going to park their cars? And then actually I've got a fourth question. So why have we got no, with the design guide, we were at pains to ensure that we had parking or storage or whatever for cycles on site. And here we are, we've got a district council facility, and there's no such facility, and I didn't see any at the Haven Centre next door either. So, you know, it's not, so we've got a distinct reduction in the number of car parking places, particularly for when you've got away teams coming there. And we've still got no provision for cycling. So would you like me to go through the questions again, or have you made a note of them?
There's no reduction in car parking. It's just the width where they meet here. They, instead of being 9 metres apart, they're now 7.5. The same car parking spaces.
Sorry, Chairman. Let me just make that a bit clearer. Well, at the moment, there is a car park there, which is a car park serving the 2 existing football fields at the rear. Thank you.
They do use the Haven Centre. I can assure you they use the Haven Centre. Haven't been down there when there's football. They use that centre quite a lot.
Maybe not. If there's a football match at the football ground, then it's going to be sorely stretched, the parking provision. Thank you.
I'll just go through those questions in order. So just to highlight here, what they've done is a crown pitch roof to the building. So it will sort of retain the height, so it'd be still usable for the badminton. In terms of the parking, it is considered that 7.5 metres is sufficient to obviously, as you can see, the sort of vehicle length here, to get a vehicle out and pull out in this area. In terms of the materials, I know your point about Ibstock bricks are no longer available. We do also, on page 186, have a materials condition. That was the details they'd provided on their plans, but they are required to submit details for approval. So if it is the case that that isn't available, they can submit details for approval of the materials, so that is all covered by condition. Note your final point about the parking. With this being a variation of condition application and the only change in the design, we're only considering the changes to the design and the impact on neighbouring amenities. The consent has been granted for the principal, so the issues such as cycle parking was all covered in the original 2019 consent. So this is not considering that issue because that's already been dealt with as part of the original permission. We're just looking at the proposed changes in this case. Thank you, Chairman.
Is the footprint the same from the previous, and has it moved on the plot? Thank you.
I missed that one. The footprint is the same and it hasn't moved on the plot.
Councillor Pulfer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, just to come back on the distances. Observation of particularly electric cars, I do not ever see a small one. Well, there is one small one, but it's a silly price. But they are all the size of a 4x4.
You having a go at my hybrid car?
No, I haven't, Mr. Chairman. But as I say, common observation, electric cars seem to be, and I suspect that's because of the battery, it seems to be substantially larger than the average cars which we have available now. And I just think that we ought to be looking forward to make sure that the turning circuits are satisfactory. And I understand it's all been agreed, but I'm assuming that Mid-Sussex, of course, will have jumped to the fore to put in electrical charging points in there.
I'm sure we did that the last time.
Have we confirmation of that, Mr. Chair?
I don't know. I can't remember. In terms of my car, they've reduced the size of the boot to accommodate smaller dogs. So the big one's not very happy, he's going. To be answered on that one. The recommendation is up on the screen behind you and behind me. It is recommended that consent has been granted subject to conditions outlined in Appendix A. Can we all agree to do our bit, please, again? It's unanimous. Thank you. Agenda. No items for refusal. Items 9 is questions pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 10.2. Due notice have been given. I have been given 2, but as the chairman of this committee, I've decided I'm not going to accept them as they are administrative questions that have easily been submitted to the officers by email and to myself. If it had been to debate about something in planning, then I would have accepted them. But as they're administrative questions, which could have easily been dealt with by an email to the officer, officers, should I say, and you will get a written answer on both of them, but I'm not accepting them for open debate today. Councillor Brand, you're the one who submitted them.
In the question 1, I have made both written and verbal question to get an answer to that.
You will get an answer because Steve Ashton's got an answer to be written to you. He copied me into the answer, should I take it today, but it is an administrative question. And the second one, you can forward that, the answer you gave to me?
Yeah.
The answer is yes.
Hmm?
The answer is yes to the second one.
The yes the second one, I've asked that question myself. It's because if it hasn't got a postcode allocated to it, it can't have a postcode on the outline where because I've been to fields in the middle of the district where there's no postcode for it because it hasn't got any houses on it. But you'll get a satisfactory answer. Both officers have said they're going to do that. So we'll go for that. So with that in mind, I close the meeting at 20 to 6, 5:40. If you take a few seconds. Thank you. In terms of the questions,